We are talking about the term Volkswagen, V-O-L-K-S-W-A-G-E-N. Volkswagen is today a company who produces cars, quite a lot of cars, but it was originally founded in the 1930s as a company to produce a car, but that wasn't called Volkswagen at the time, but it was called Strength Through Joy car, KdF Wagen, in the 1930s, and it was only later branded Volkswagen and then became the Volkswagen Beetle, as it is known.
What does Volkswagen mean?
It means actually people's car, so the car for everybody, for everyone. And the concept of that was developed already in the 1920s when people thought about mass mobilization, like in the United States. And in the 1930s, people, particularly in Germany, like Hitler, wanted to have some sort of similar car for the German population. At the beginning of the 1930s, the German car industry still produced cars which were mainly luxury cars, and the assumption was that not many people would be able to afford a car, which was the case at this time. Hitler's idea or understanding was that the people should have some car which should be able to have space for 2 grown-ups and 3 children and should drive 100 kilometers. He demanded this or asked the German car industry to produce such kind of car, but the car industry was very reluctant. So he went to some of his cronies, the German Labour Front, and the German Labour Front indirectly financed and subsidized the development of this car. Hitler commissioned the production of some prototypes in 1934, and 2 years later the first prototypes were produced. It would have lost money if any of the people who wanted to buy these cars would have received a car, but they didn't. The Volkswagen buyers, or the KdF Wagen buyers, paid in installments in some sort of savings plans, 5 Reichsmark per week. So they would have to save for about 4 years to have 990 marks, which was the official price. But when the people who had saved this 990 marks had reached the full sum, war had started and no one actually ever received a Volkswagen at this time. The factory had used the money from the savings to build up the production, but during the war the production was used for the so-called bucket car, which was a military vehicle, which was used throughout the war to transport German soldiers all over Europe. And only after 1945 the production of civil cars started, which then later became the Volkswagen Beetle. Although one has to say that after 1945 all those people who had saved for the car and had virtually the right to own a Volkswagen went to court against the Volkswagen company, and it took a few years, but in 1961 they settled, and all those people who had still their saving cards were then allowed to buy a new Volkswagen in 1961 for 600 marks less than the original price, or to get 100 Deutschmark in cash. So that was a compromise. When the Second World War ended, the factory was taken over by the British occupation forces, and it was under British control for the first few years. And the British tried to sell it either to a British company or to an American company, but they all refused because they thought it's not up to date. And so it went into the hands of the German government and the government of Lower Saxony, which still owns 20% of Volkswagen to this day. And then production started, and when the economic miracle, so to speak, in the 1950s in the Federal Republic started, many people wanted to buy a car, mass mobilization, and the Volkswagen Beetle was, so to speak, the answer to this. So it was a very cheap, very reliable car, which spread all over Europe and even to the United States, and became a very popular car for mass mobilization. Well, I wouldn't draw this direct line between the Volkswagen and Hitler. I mean, there was, of course, he was behind the will to subsidize it in this way so that it could be produced in the 1930s as a prototype. But the real success of Volkswagen only came after the war. It was in the 1970s that Volkswagen came into a big crisis, that the company had this major Volkswagen Beetle as a pillar, but it became an old-fashioned car, and so they had to reinvent something new, and that's when the Golf, or in the United States called the Rabbit, came out in 1974, and it has by now overtaken the success of the Beetle by far over the past 36 years. There are many German car companies, and of course people think of Volkswagen as a very German car, but the same they do with BMW or with Mercedes-Benz or now with Audi, which is now part of Volkswagen, and others. And so there is a clear esteem in Germany, of course, for the car industry, for engineering. People like this kind of engineering and this kind of mobility. You know that in Germany there is no speed limit on motorways, and people enjoy that, me included. And it's very nice to have this sort of engineering available.